This is Pod Populi, podcast for the people. Hey guys, and welcome back to Pillow Talk Unplugged. Super excited here to have Pega as our guest today, relationship expert, I'm going to call you. I've worked with you for a couple times, actually, and I met her years ago at an NLP event, which I was just super stoked to learn about neuro-linguistic programming, and just really felt drawn to her, and then wound up working with her. And so I'm really excited to have you here today to talk about, how we can, how to get into relationships again, I guess, after a divorce or a breakup. It's been a while, a couple years, I think, for me, for just even not being with anyone, and taking that time to heal and do as much inner work as I can. And, Edgar, the same.
Same here. Yeah. Well, of course, we have to define what not being with anyone means.
Yeah.
Because,
let's define that for sure. I mean, for me, I have not been in a relationship at all in 3 years. I've done on a few dates, but I'm also like, nope. And it's just been like a whole fun, not so fun world of dating. It's just, I'm kind of like at the point where I'm like, I'm done. I took myself off all the apps. And as much as I want to date, I'm also absolutely freaking terrified of it. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I think to me, being with someone is when you are dating and you kind of see a future ahead, not like crystal clear, like, oh my God, I'm going to marry this person again.
Yeah.
But just in your mind thinking like, okay, I can see this progressing. And I think that's kind of the biggest challenge, because you after being in a breakup, you have so many doubts about even like doubting a happy situation, because a previous happy situation went completely downhill. And so you tend to kind of pull back and say, well, look, it seems to be going okay, but I don't want to even imagine a future because last time I did and it didn't work out. So that's certainly challenging. Well, Pega, thank you for coming on the show. We're excited to have you on, and tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do and how you help people in these situations.
I love it. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to be here. I was so excited to hear from you and to just see that you're doing so well. I'm so excited for you, especially just knowing, because I was with you during a tricky time in relationship, as a matter of fact. So, so as was mentioned, my background is pretty diverse. I actually come from a performing arts background. Initially, I was an actor, singer, dancer, and as it happens with a lot of us in the performing arts, we very often shift careers. And I still dabble in that a little bit here and there. It's more for fun than anything else, but primarily, I ventured into the world of coaching and then ultimately teaching and facilitation. So it started off as one-on-one coaching in the world of just overall health and wellness. And then it transitioned into what I would call resilience coaching. So I was helping primarily women, but all people who had gone through a really difficult time. So it could have been a divorce. It could have been the passing of a loved one, or just a big life transition. My coaching program, my signature program, really helped with people who were going through big changes to cultivate a sense of resiliency and ultimately come back home to themselves, to feel at home with themselves. And then very naturally evolved into working with couples, because a lot of the skills that you can apply to being a resilient human being can also be transferred to being resilient within your relationship. The difference, of course, is that there's only so much that a person can do as far as healing and self-exploration is concerned when they're alone. And then there's a whole other level of self-exploration, discovery, and healing that happens in relationship. Because as human beings, we're meant to be in relationship. And by that, I don't mean that we're meant to be in partnership. I mean that we're meant to be in relationship with other human beings. So whether that's a friendship, whether that's obviously our family dynamics, or just working alongside people, our coworkers, we're meant to relate to other human beings. We're not meant to be lone wolves, kind of isolating ourselves away from the world. However, the context of being in an intimate relationship specifically is an incredible playground or breeding ground, if you will, for growth. Because there's things that come up when you're trying to relate to another human being in that dynamic within an intimate relationship that just wouldn't come up if you were alone. that just don't come up if you are just in a friendship or even in family dynamics.
Yeah.
Aspects of yourself that you didn't know were there, parts of yourself that you didn't know were there reveal themselves. And in some cases, rear their ugly head. And then you have to confront them. What happens for a lot of people in relationship is that at the first sign of conflict or difficulty, they tend to cut and run, right? We hear this, we've heard that relationships are work, but we've also heard, oh, relationships shouldn't be hard work. But the fact is that relationships are meant to be a place where two people grow, and growth is uncomfortable and can often lead to conflict. And people seem to be afraid of conflict. Mm-hmm. And I'm here to tell you that conflict is not bad. If it turns into a toxic relationship whereby harm is being done to one or both parties, then that conflict is one where it might be a good idea for parties to go their separate ways. But conflict in and of itself is inevitable in any human dynamic, especially within an intimate relationship. So what I found in starting to work with couples was, oh, there's a whole set of information that people need that they don't have. Mm-hmm. And as a trainer of NLP, there's a lot in that lexicon of work around just understanding yourself better, communicating with human beings better, whether they're your partner or not, how to better communicate with yourself and other people, but then also just ways of understanding yourself better, like knowing, what's your communication style, knowing, what are your preferences when it comes to just like your inner programming. And none of that is like meant to be changed. It's not bad. It's your hard wiring. And then my background sort of shifted from just NLP and resilience coaching to moving into the world of the Enneagram, which is one of the most incredible tools out there for understanding yourself and other people. It's an ancient symbol that goes back over 5,000 years. As we know it today, it's become a system of psychological understanding, but can also go down the path of a spiritual understanding of oneself. So it's very, very, it can go very deep if you want it to. But as I studied the Enneagram and then further along looked at things like internal family systems and parts, which is Stephen Schwartz's work, what I came to understand is, there's a lot to a human being. Like, we're complex. Yeah. And
you think?
And what I got from all of that was like, oh man, people really don't know themselves before they get into a relationship. And so when we talk about like, how do we go from ending a relationship, doing the healing work, and then ultimately being ready to start a new relationship, the first thing that needs to happen is to better understand ourselves. So what was it inside the relationship that didn't work that belonged to me? Like, what role did I have to play and how things unfolded? Most people have a much easier time pointing fingers and saying they did that. And I swear to God, if I hear the word narcissist one more time from someone who doesn't really know what that word means, there are some people who are in fact diagnosed bona fide, like textbook narcissists. I will give you that. But just because you didn't like your ex or he did you dirty or they did you dirty doesn't mean that they're a narcissist, right? There's things like attachment styles that come into play that are huge. Yeah. That, if you had a better understanding of, let's say 3 things, right? Your communication style, your Enneagram type, and your attachment style. If you just got to know those 3 things before you got into a relationship, and then you could communicate those things to your partner, just that,
huge,
I think would huge save relationships.
And it's funny because I first learned of communication style through you, and I bring it up with even who I work with, coworkers and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, so I hear literally and I speak figuratively. So that's it. So when you're like, some people are like, just get to the point. I'm like, but I am. I thought I said it. And like, that's my figurative way. Like, I paint the whole story in order to like get there. But then you tell me something and I'm Amelia Bedelia and I'm like, oh yeah, it's literal. Like, that's literally literally what it is. So, and it's so funny when you work with people who are different and you see that and you're aware of it and you're like, oh, that's what happened there. Got it. You know, and if everyone could do that, it would be so much easier in relations. Like 100%.
Well, we have this assumption, right? That everybody communicates the same way.
There. I don't mean to interrupt. Yeah. Ask your question. Were you going to ask me what that is?
No, a little bit, yeah. But I mean, it was interesting because, I'm not familiar with the communication styles, but it makes sense to me because you kind of grow up with this idea that everybody communicates the same way, right? You all go to school, you learn grammar, you learn how to write, and everybody's kind of graded and evaluated on the same communication style and skills. And then you get into the real world as you grow up and you realize, like you said, like there's just sometimes a disconnect. And, and sometimes it's a disconnect with someone who you think you respect them and they're intelligent, but somehow you're just not connecting verbally. So I think it's just a powerful tool to be able to at least at first understand that there is such a different communication style.
Yeah.
Well, there's something, it's really fundamental. I mean, like what you're talking about in terms of communication is just like means of communication, right? There's verbal communication, there's written communication, there's nonverbal communication, and in the world of NLP, we teach about rapport and how to establish rapport with someone, which is, 54% is nonverbal communication. It's body language. So most of, our communication is nonverbal communication. So it's body language, tone, speed. I mean, you name it. There's so many different ways that we communicate that are not words. Words are only 7%. So I think that's where things kind of go sideways is that understanding that how you occur to somebody very much has to do with how they take information in. Meaning, if you're trying to establish a connection with somebody and they tend to be very soft-spoken, maybe they don't gesture at all, they don't have a lot of facial expressions, and you're me, right, who's like very expressive. I talk with my hands. I talk really loudly. I'm really like, my face is doing things all the time. If I want to really make that person feel safe and understood, initially I got to bring it down and match them. So there's this thing called matching and mirroring, which then makes the other person feel safe. And then once you've established that, then you can start to kind of shift into your own style. And there's, pacing and leading, and we don't need to get into all that. What we're referring to with respect to communication style goes a little bit deeper than that. And that has to do with how you listen and how you talk. So there's inferential, right? Where you're like, I'm inferring what the person is saying, AKA I'm reading between the lines, not what they're saying, but what I think they're saying. And then there's literal, right? Yeah. Which is like what they're actually saying is what I'm hearing. So we can have two different styles. We can have a literal speaking style where we're actually saying exactly what it is we mean, and we're being very direct about what's in here. Or we can have an inferential speaking style where we're implying, we're hinting, we're kind of beating around the bush, but we're not really saying the thing. One isn't better than the other. They just both exist. But we can also listen that way. So you could be a literal listener, or you can be an inferential listener. And how you can understand these things, understand this about yourself is, if I said to you, gosh, I'm really thirsty, and you were a literal listener, you would say, shoot, that must be really hard for you. Or you might say, yeah, I'm thirsty too, right?
And I would have gotten you a drink.
It's not because you're selfish. Yeah. But if you're an inferential listener, you would get up and get me a glass of water. One isn't better than the other, because there could be a scenario where I might say, here's an example, man, I really don't like my car. I'm not trying to tell you to go buy me a car. But now combine this with an Enneagram. Let's say you're an Enneagram 2, which is a helper, and you hear someone say, someone you really care about, man, I really don't like my car anymore. This is a real story. Someone went out and bought this person a car. And it was like, I did not ask you to buy me a car.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's like, we just have to understand who we're dealing with. Now, if I'm an inferential speaker and I'm saying I'm thirsty, my hope is that you'll pick up what I'm putting down and go get me a glass of water.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm a literal speaker and I'm just saying I'm thirsty, I'm just kind of declaring that to the world. Like, weird, I'm thirsty. I don't expect you to get me a glass of water. So you see where something so small, so simple can really mess up the relationship.
Yeah.
Right. Because then the other person will be like, oh, well, I was trying to tell you I'm thirsty and you didn't do anything,
right?
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, let's say you're an inferential speaker and you want some sexy time, but you've got a literal listener and you say, honey, isn't this romantic? Like, we're snuggled up on the couch together and the fire's going and we've got a glass of wine. Isn't this nice? And you kind of like snuggle up to your partner a little bit and your partner's a literal listener and they're going, it is nice. Yeah. Great. The fire's cozy. The wine is good. And we're cuddling. And you're going, dude, are you not? I'm literally throwing you all the clues, right? Well, that person is going to need you to quite literally say to them, would you like to have some sexy time right now? Otherwise, you're not having sex that night. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, if you know how your partner communicates, then you can adjust. No different than if you know your partner's love languages, right? So it's like, maybe you're an active service person, but your partner's a physical touch person. Well, you can't be like taking the trash out all the time and hoping that your partner knows that you love them when what they want is for you to touch them. So it's like, when you understand, then you can tell your partner, hey, I'm an inferential listener. So when you say things, I'm going to read between the lines and I'm not going to know what you're saying to me because I'm going to kind of be interpreting things.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm an inferential talker. So when I say things, I have a really hard time being super direct. Like, you're going to have to ask me a lot of questions because I'm not really good at like saying exactly what it is that I'm trying to say. It's not good. It's not bad. It's not happy. It's not sad. It's just what it is. So when you learn even something as simple as that about yourself in the healing process after a breakup, and you can be like, all right, I am ready to tell my next partner how I communicate. When you know what your attachment style is, you can tell your partner, for example, hey, I have an anxious attachment style, or I have a avoidant attachment style, although most avoidants wouldn't really admit it to their partners, to be honest with you. And, you know, if you don't know what attachment styles are, there's a really great book out there. I'm not endorsing it. If you want me to say the name, I'll say the name.
You can go for it. I love that book. It's great.
It's a great book. It's just called Attached. And they just give a really beautiful explanation of what attachment styles are, how you can work with your attachment style, and the fact that you're not stuck with it. Like, you can get earned secure, you know? You can be someone who's avoidant and learn that about yourself and then work on it, right? So that if you're like, ooh, I'm feeling like I really just want to like distance myself from this person because they're getting too close to me and I'm starting to feel vulnerable and I better leave before they break my heart. Well, then you can modify that and be like, hey, this is who I am. These are my tendencies, and you can work on it. If you're an anxious attachment style, you can tell your partner, hey, like, sometimes if you pull away from me and ask me for space, I might start to feel really insecure and anxious, right, and I might need more reassurance from you. So I would say the primary thing to do when you break up with someone is, first of all, reflect back on the relationship. As you do, please come to a place of gratitude for what you learned, because, you know, I learned from one of my teachers, how the energy with which you end something carries over into the next thing that you start. So if you ended a relationship in a really contentious way and it was angry and awful, find a way to come to a place of healing and forgiveness. And remember that forgiveness is not about condoning behavior. It's about freeing yourself from carrying that stuff around. I'm not sure if I'm not supposed to.
You can cuss all you want. We're good.
We're good. Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
This isn't the radio.
It's like they say, to not forgive is to drink the poison and hope the other person dies.
And on that note, true that. And on that note, we got to take a break.
We'll be right back.
Don't drink the poison. And we're back from break. Thank you so much. And so continue. Sorry about that.
No, so good. I'm just saying, I think step one in ending a relationship is find forgiveness. Learn to let go of that relationship from a place of love and gratitude in your heart. If nothing else, you learned a lot about yourself.
True.
If nothing else.
Yeah, very true.
And then next, reflect on that relationship. What was your part in it? I guarantee you it was not just your partner's fault.
Oh,
Never.
It takes two to tango.
Takes two.
Yeah, true that. So I'm curious about the Enneagrams as well. Can you like quickly run through them all and like a little bit about what each one is? And then we both took the test. So
we did.
You're a 3?
I'm an achiever.
Yeah. And I'm a achiever. 4. The independent, I guess that's what it's called. Yeah.
So,
Individualist.
I don't know.
I'm going to start by saying this is a really complex system.
Yeah.
And it's very complex, and there's so much more to it than taking a test.
Okay.
And it's a great place to start. A lot of people start by saying, I took the test. I would encourage you to not get too attached to that number based solely on a test. I was mistyped 3 times using the test before I actually landed on where my personality sits. The other thing I would caution you against is saying, I am an Enneagram 3 or I am an Enneagram 4. Your personality sits at Enneagram 4. Your personality sits at Enneagram 3.
Thank you.
You are not your personality, right? Your personality is the sum total of your experiences, your wounds, your baggage, your persona. It's not the essence of who you are. You are so much more than your personality. Understanding your personality is a great way to evolve and better understand yourself and other people. The other thing I caution people against in learning the Enneagram is it's not an excuse for bad behavior. Meaning, it's not okay to just say, well, I'm an Enneagram 8, which is like my personality sits at 8.
I used to be an 8, so that's what's so weird.
That's the other thing we're going to talk about. You don't used to anything, right? Like you either are or you aren't, meaning like you might have typed as an 8 and then realized, oh, I was mistyped, and actually the personality sits at 4. And it's a process. And I would say embrace the process of finding where your personality sits. That's the best part, is digging into it. And I would recommend, so let me finish the thought around, like I would caution you against saying, well, I am an 8 or my personality sits at 8. So I am just really abrasive. I can be bitchy. I'm really bossy and like take it or leave it. That's just who I am. That's not the point of the Enneagram. Right. The point of the Enneagram is to better understand why you do what you do, why you behave the way you have behaved, so that you can ultimately embrace it. I don't want to say transcend it. I would say integrate it so that you can access the higher side, your virtue, the holy idea of each number, so that you can then move to the arrow line that is your growth path, access more of that number, be able to also access the arrow line to your stress point and be able to access the high side of that number, and ultimately realize that the goal of the Enneagram is to be able to tap into the essence and the high side of all of the numbers, because you have all of those energies inside of you. Let's just start there. And then say, then there's 9 types. And the types are, really were introduced in the 70s. Before that, there were no personality types. It was Claudio Naranjo who studied with Oscar Ichazo, who studied with Gurdjieff, who was kind of the grandfather of this system, studied, with the desert fathers is what he referred to them as, in a mystery school. And then ultimately this kind of evolved from there. Claudio Naranjo was a psychotherapist and, then it was the person who primarily helped shape these numbers, this system into what we know as the personality types, right? And a lot of other people have contributed to that, including, Don Riso and Russ Hudson, whom I've studied with. He's wonderful. Russ is a great person to study with if you've ever get a chance. And I highly recommend a book to, start if you just want an introduction to it. My mentor wrote it. I can't say enough about it. I can't say enough about her. Dr. Deborah Egerton, I'm just going to drop her name right here. She wrote a beautiful book. And by the way, I don't get any like kickbacks or anything. I just love her and I'm just putting her out there. But she wrote an incredible book called The Enneagram Made Easy. It's not the only one out there. So definitely look for Dr. Deborah Egerton as you're looking. But it's a beautiful introduction to these types. I'll run through them as quick as I can.
Sure.
It would usually take me like 3 hours really to dig into each one of these types and the ins and outs of them. But usually we start with the fact that there are 3 centers of intelligence. There's the body types or the gut types, the head types, the heart types, but we go body, heart, head in that order. They correspond to different parts of your brain. So the body types correspond to your basal ganglia or your, reptilian brain. The heart types correspond to the emotional center of your brain. I won't use technical terms. And then the head types refer to the prefrontal neocortex or just your thinking brain, which was the most recently evolved. And the body types are 8, 9, and 1. All 3 centers of intelligence have an emotion that they tend to default to or access most readily or suppress. So the body types 8, 9, and 1 access anger or suppress it most readily. That's their emotion that they most readily go to. They're expressed in different ways. The 8s are the challengers. So their anger gets expressed outwardly and often. The 9s are the peacemakers. And their anger gets suppressed usually, and it comes out like a volcano, like it erupts, and then you're like, whoa, what just happened? And then they go right back to suppressing
That's my mom.
The ones are the reformers. They're the perfectionists, and their anger comes out in little spurts like agitation and irritation. The 2s, now we venture into the heart types, are the helpers. And the emotion that the heart types tend to go to most readily is shame, or they suppress it. So 2s, they experience shame through feeling like if they're not doing something for somebody else, they have no value. And that's how they experience that emotion. So helping. The 3s are the achievers. They're the ones that are going to deny the fact that they're even feeling shame. And frankly, emotions are really inconvenient because they're not particularly efficient. And 3s are really about getting external validation, meaning they need the world to tell them that what they're doing is good through reward, through money, through acknowledgement of some kind, right? They need to feel like they're the best at everything. The 4s are the individualists, and they tend to experience shame through feeling like they just don't belong anywhere. They really experience a lot of like, why don't I fit anywhere? I'm so different. And the thing is, they're also really convinced that they're different than everybody else. Like nobody else is like them.
Always felt that way.
And they tend to really envy, right? There's a lot of like looking over there and saying the grass is greener. And they experience shame. They tend to really be in their feelings a lot. And they swim in it. Sometimes they get lost in it. It's really like, sometimes we tell types like, or, people like, hey, you really need to be in your feelings a little bit more. For a 4, you would say, hey, you need to come out. You need to come out of your feels.
This is true.
This is true.
That's why I got to keep busy or I'll go insane. Literally. I have to keep busy.
They are also, like, again, every type has an upside, right? So the challengers are incredible leaders. The peacemakers are incredible at mediating. The reformers are wonderful at making sure that compliance is and everything is just right, just so, The 2s are wonderful. When they're healthy, they're really incredibly giving without any expectation of anything in return. 3s are wonderful at getting stuff done. You know what I mean? And they make it happen and they're really good at it. The fours, they are the poets, the artists. They make the world beautiful.
Makes sense.
That's not to say there can't be artists, and other types can also be artists, right? Then we move into the head types, and the emotion that the head types default to very often is fear or anxiety. So we go from 4 then to 5. The 5s are the investigators, right? So they're thinkers. They acquire knowledge voraciously. They do so because they're desperate to understand the world, to understand their environment. And the more information they can gather to understand it, the better they feel. 5s tend to experience that sense of fear when it comes to what I say, peopling too much, meaning like they kind of hit a wall. And once they've like had enough, they've really had enough. And, the 5, they say, that their thing is avarice. And it's not that they're hoarding and withholding. It's that they tend to withhold themselves or information. Like they'll hold themselves back from you or hold information back from you if they're not in a healthy place. The 6s are the loyalists, right? So these are incredibly organized people, but they're the most anxious of the bunch. They tend to be in their head a lot. They also tend to be a little indecisive, meaning they don't love authority, but they look for someone to give them direction.
It's my sister.
Right? It's great to have a 6 on your team if you're a leader. So they need direction. They don't necessarily want to be micromanaged. Again, they don't love authority, but they look to find someone that can give them a sense of direction because they tend to feel a little lost without it. They're incredibly organized. They're incredibly loyal. That's why they're called the loyalists. 7s is apparently what everybody wants to be. They're the enthusiasts. But there also can be problems with 7s, right? So 5s can be wonderful. Usually, like if you have someone who's got PhDs, like multiple PhDs, who knows a lot about, like they go really deep into one subject matter, that's awesome. They're usually 5s. A 6 is going to be super organized. Those spreadsheets are going to be on point. They're going to be super detail oriented. 6s and 1s very often get mixed up. They can look similar. And your 7s are the enthusiasts. They are constantly looking for the fun, the party. They're sort of like, deadly sin, if you will, is gluttony. And it's not about food. They're just looking for more experiences, more variety, more, right? And the why for that is they're trying to avoid painful feelings. The biggest thing that a 7 fears is being stuck in a hard emotion. They want to get out. So they're looking for variety. They never want to feel trapped. So everyone wants to be a 7 because they think, they're the life of the party. But 7s don't always have it very easy either because they have a hard time accessing tough emotions. They're the ones that are going to have the toughest time, like admitting that they need to go to therapy or that there's anything to even heal, right? That can be problematic in and of itself. So every type has its virtue. Every type has its fixation. Every type has an upside and a problematic aspect. You know what I mean? A thing that's going to trip them up or hold them back. But understanding yourself and understanding, your partner's type can be really incredible. Now, there's so many other pieces to this, right? There are arrow lines, meaning you have a stress point and you have a security point. No time to get into that. But you tend to access the energies of those numbers when you're stressed or when you feel secure. There's an upside and a downside to that.
And then you have wings too, right?
Types, meaning sexual. Yeah. We have a sexual subtype or 1-to-1 as it's referred to, social and self-pres. So there are really like 27 possible different iterations of what this can look like, right? You could be like a sexual 8 with a 7 as a wing, and that's one look. You could be a social 8 with a 9 wing. You lean into one of the wings. Your wings are the numbers that are next to you. So you lean into the energies of those numbers too. So you could be an 8 with a 9 wing and be self-preservation. And that's a whole different look. and a whole different set of things. So it's, like I said, very complex and very, very rich is a better word for it. So it's a system that you could spend literally 30 years studying and there would still be more to learn.
I heard there's a retreat you can go to learn more about this.
Yeah.
There is a retreat that you can go to. At the moment, unfortunately, because it's so far out, there isn't a website, but you can certainly just reach out to me personally. So the retreat is going to be the first week in October. It'll be in Europe, either somewhere in Spain, very likely in Spain, or Mallorca, which is the island off of the coast of Spain.
Love it there.
The first week in October. We're securing the location. We're still in process. But the theme of the retreat is I'm a yoga teacher, so there'll definitely be yoga twice a day, both vinyasa, like energizing yoga, and yin for those who want a little more relaxed approach. But we'll also have workshops every day on relationships. So we'll cover things like communication style, attachment style, Enneagram. What would you need to understand about yourself to heal from a relationship? What would you need to understand about your partner to have a better relationship? How can you communicate with each other better if you're in partnership? If you're in a relationship that needs to end, like, what are the tools that you need? What are the signs for when and how to tell that a relationship is coming to an end? So we'll cover all of this in the 7 days that we'll be out there. So if that's something you're interested in, absolutely, you can get my information from these lovely folks and reach out to me directly, and we'll get you all that information and make sure that you have what you need. We're going to officially launch January 1st. So
amazing. And then your website, we'll plug it in the notes as well, but feel free to mention.
Sure. My website is coachpega.com. Really easy to find. And then you can find me on Instagram. It's just, Pega Cadcodian, if you just look for me there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I do a lot of consulting work for organizations in organizational development. So if you're a business, please know that all of these tools for relationships also are relevant inside the workplace, and how to be a better leader and how to have, better conversations with your team. Absolutely. So I do a lot of that as well. I facilitate workshops. So those are ongoing. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. That's primarily where I'm going to launch and announce things. I'm on Facebook too, but I'm not really on Facebook.
You were going to say something?
I was going to say, well, we had talked about a Spain trip for research purposes. To find out about the whole pineapple thing. So you have to watch the previous episode so you know what we're talking about.
Absolutely. The more the merrier. We are only going to take 16 people.
Awesome.
So, if it's something that interests you, definitely reach out so that we can secure your spot.
I think that would be super fun. Thank you so much. I forgot about yoga because actually that's where I first met you. We were both at Core Power. So way back in the day. Totally forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still there.
Are you really? Yeah. I wish they had one here. Unfortunately, they don't. Everywhere else in the U.S. but Florida. Anyway.
Well, they have one in Miami. There's one in Miami. That's it.
Yeah. I guess I got to
should be one around here.
There really should be.
It's an opportunity.
I actually wrote them and was like, you need to open up one here. And they're like, we're not opening up anymore. But anyway.
Well, we should talk. Maybe I'll come to Florida and open up a yoga studio. Who knows? I'm kidding.
Please. That would be amazing. Anyway.
I'm not opposed to it if an opportunity presents itself.
Ooh.
I kid. But it's so great, friends. Thank you so much for having me on. I can't wait to listen to the last episode.
Thank you so much for coming on. We deeply appreciate it. Thank you
for all the wonderful insight.
Yes.
My pleasure.
All right. Talk soon. Bye. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back next week with another awesome episode.